I don't know nothing about no Shakespeare.
It is buried in that long paragraph, the Hamlet.
Quoth the raven.
To be or not to be, that is a question. Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and but a sea of troubles by opposing end them, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. You're the east, and then I'm the sun, something like that?
That's a different play.
Oh, okay.
That's okay, though.
I'm not a huge fan of the peer.
No, you just write in English for a living.
Hello, the Sonic City Council is now in session. Thank you once again for inviting us into your headphones, your car, your home, your mind. David Sipes, Jr., Senior, Esquire. What's up with you, sir?
Well, thank you, Dr. Mr. Jesse Davidson.
Yep.
Senior?
Yep.
And Viva Los Meatbags. Welcome back to another installment of
Yes.
the home arrest version.
Gavel. All right. I brought in the gavel from the heavens.
I like how if you did like 10 of those and then 3 sets of that, you would be working on your core. So
I did. It doesn't look like it, but I'm starting to do that. I've been
especially when you show it to me.
Yeah, I've been doing light workouts for the past.
What's your sitch, bro? What's your routine, bro?
It's all.
Are you on bulks yet, bro? You gotta
No.
take protein. You gotta stack, bro. You gotta stack proteins, and then you gotta take your pre-workout, bro.
Yeah. I definitely gotta do that. I'm doing all calisthenic stuff, so I'm doing like lunges, squats on leg days, crunches. Can't really do sit-ups. I always struggle with those. So I'm just kind of easing into it with crunches, and then doing push-ups and what's the other one? And just like light free weights, but a lot of reps. And so basically just all of it in the last couple of weeks has been like, hey, you've been completely sedentary, so now you're getting your body like in motion. And so it's been 2.5 weeks of working out, which is no Instagram influencer gym sort of accomplishment. But for somebody that's lazy as fuck, it's it's a work in progress. It's a step in the right direction.
Every human being is exactly that, my friend.
Every little thing she does is magic.
Everything she do just turned me on.
Is that the lyric?
Yeah.
I got you this time.
Yeah, no, but then I was already thinking about "Don't Stand So Close to Me."
Yeah, which is my favorite Police song, just because I picture somebody that's just breathing on Sting's neck, and he's just like, "Hey, don't stand so close to me, Mister Buddy, pal."
It almost. Now, it's not. I'm not putting that out there, but it really, lyrically, reads kind of like he's breathing on someone else's neck. Someone. And there's like a power dynamic and an age difference kind of thing. That's what the song is about. I'm not saying that is based on his, real life experience. But, what's based on real life is his nickname is he used to wear the Bumblebee sweater to gigs, and people called him Sting, or he said, "Call me Sting," and that's why he's Sting. So
I did not know that.
There is some fact to some fictions.
That's I'm glad
I'm a
you're
truther
here
or a birther. Am I a birth truther?
I don't know.
None of those things, guys. I don't know what they are, and I'm pretty sure I hate the people who are those
You're
things.
a Sting truther. Get the truth out about
I'm a
his
Sting
nickname.
truther, baby. He wore a sweater. He asked people to call him that. That's my truthing.
So I don't want to delay. I don't want to delay this any further, because today we have one of the mentors of my musical tech roadie life, and that is Mr. Kevin Dugan. And he is Michael Anthony's bass tech from Van Halen and Chickenfoot and all of the accomplishments. Yeah, air horns, applause, confetti coming down from the ceiling.
Doing the boomerang clap.
Yes. If Max doesn't put an air horn in there, I'll be upset. It's the only time I've ever going to say that on this podcast.
Oh,
anyway,
Max, also throw in a... but like a real one over me doing it.
We're getting into sound effects,
Thank
folks.
you.
So anyway.
Marker sound speed. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yes. He's been Michael Anthony's tech for 40 years. Yes. 40 years. He's also worked for a ton of other bands. Fleetwood Mac, specifically with Bob Welsh back in the day in the earlier part of the band. Poison. He's done gigs for and toured with The Cult and Weezer. And Michael has sort of been his main gig through his whole time in music. And so he's got literally a ton of stories. And so we're not going to cover it all. There's going to be, I know we're not going to be able to cover it all because you just can't in, an hour and a half. It's just not going to be the case. But, we are going to have a damned good time talking to him, as I know I always do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll just put it out there. Meatbags, this is the first installment of what's definitely our first spin-off miniseries.
One can hope. One can hope. I hope there will be a part 2, but we shall see what happens. But anyway, yes, we need to explore Mr. Kevin Dugan's life because there are not too many, as people who are unaware, the roadies and the techs are the people behind the scenes. They are not going out to seek attention for various things. But with someone who's been around as long as Doogie has, occasionally he'll get hit up for interviews and asked about Van Halen questions and all sorts of things like that. And I noticed there was kind of a lack of podcasts, with him. And I figured, well, since I've got a podcast, maybe he would graciously come on here and talk to us. And he agreed to do it. So I'm just so stoked to get into this conversation.
Therefore, we must.
We must, and we shall.
We must increase our bust.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man who was born in the back of a truck, Kevin Doogie Dugan. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good.
It's been a minute. Oh, man, that is an awfully big mug you have there.
Nice mug, sir. That's a fine mug.
You know what? It's
I came for the mugging as well.
Tara Reid Design. Tara Reid Design. I don't know. I bought it at 99-cent store.
Tara Reid of Sharknado fame? That Tara Reid?
Yeah.
The good one? The good Tara Reid?
Of Sharknado
I pretend
fame.
that there's two. I don't think. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Oh, man.
She's a good person, man. Good mug. Good mug.
Tara Reid.
Yep. Hell yeah. I didn't know she did houseware stuff. That's sick.
Well, I didn't either. Like I said, I bought it at 99-cent store, but I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to talk to you under any circumstances, whether it's late on the phone talking about music, over Zoom, in person. The last time we did that, I can't remember when, but yeah,
I miss it.
I miss it. I miss it too, man. So this is my co-host, Mr. Davey Sipes, and he is the person exploring music ideas and creativity with me on this podcast. So,
cool.
We're just so thrilled to have you here, man, as a guest. This is awesome.
Nice to meet you, Kevin.
Nice to meet you too, my friend.
Thank you, man.
So I wanted to ask you before we get into how you got into rock and roll and all that good stuff. Where did that phrase come from, born in the back of a truck? Was that a friend of yours that dubbed that? I forget how that came about.
Just because I'm really good at loading trucks, and it just happened where, it's one friend of mine, Alan Howard. He always says Dugan was born in the back of a truck.
Yeah.
But it kind of was one of those phrases that, people have said it a lot. I mean, you've seen me load a truck when everybody was betting that we'd never get all that stuff back from Nashville. And you go, what are we doing? We're going and getting some wood. We're going to cut wood. We're going to make our own shelves in the truck. And you're going, whoa. Well, it's not, I think more than anything, it's because I've been doing it for 50 years,
Yeah. Well, if loading trucks were a sport, or if it were somehow a category of art, I would either submit it to a museum or to be involved in, the next Olympics whenever that comes around, because
it's coming this year, but we're good in the next 4. I think we should go ahead and put in a ballot for loading trucks.
I do too.
Summer 2025 or whenever they're going to do it, man. Shit.
Except I might be too old by then.
You're going to
coach. Then you'll be the coach.
Yeah, you'll coach the U.S. team.
Everybody needs that badass coach.
I'm in. I like
it's
that.
all because of coach.
I like that idea.
Yeah. So anyway,
I want to learn about loading trucks. I have an obsession about loading like gear for the gig, because I'm a very like day gig guy. So I'm all about like packing in the PA and the bass amp and stuff in the car in my Toyota just right. So I want to get into these truck packing stories as soon as possible. I want to know.
Yeah.
Tell us about the art of it.
Well, it's just a matter of, certain basic things. So I watch people and they say, I'm really good at loading a truck. Then I watch them put something heavy on something light that's on wheels. And you go, well, the next day that's going to, take off a load bar or move something. That's going to fall on the loaders, I don't know. It's just, it's more of a matter of common sense, but I've also developed a pretty keen eye as far as getting everything in the right row, not being loose. And you always got to try to come out with a wall, an even wall if you can,
Yeah.
Now that's a great point. I was wondering, how often have you encountered that where you have somebody throwing something like that and you got to give them that teachable moment of like, you can't do that, that's going to fall. Like, is it more often than I would think? I would assume that.
Yeah, and you know what? I remember doing a professional gig. It was like Lita Ford, Poison, and Def Leppard. And I had Lita's gear at the very front of Poison's truck. I made a deal with them because I was the crew chief for Poison on 4 or 5 tours. But anyways, so they'd unload Poison and Def Leppard in the morning, and then I'd get a couple of guys in mid-afternoon, and I would drop everything down, lower everything down, and then I could, build a stage inside the truck and be ready to go to take everything on stage. Well, I have a horrible problem with my left shoulder, which stems from when this happened, which was in 2012. We were taking down a 8x10 bass cabinet, which was about chest high, laying on its side, and it was myself and 3 loaders. And this guy's phone rang next to me, and we were pulling this down. It was in midair. I was on one corner, he was on the other corner, and another 2 guys on the other 2 corners. This guy let go of the case, turned around and answered his phone. And of course, all the weight of the case came down on me, and it just pulled my arm right down. And I've never had it fixed, and I can't even sleep on that side. And the thing fell to the ground. I looked at the guy and I'm going, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And he goes, "What's your problem?" And I had been doing this venue for 40 years, so I called the I said, "Everybody stop," and I said, get me a supervisor. And I told the guy what happened, and the guy's going, fuck him. What's his fucking problem? And the guy goes, "Did you really answer your phone while you're in the back of a truck?" And I said, "Not only in the back of a truck, but in the middle of taking a case down." And the guy goes, "Yeah, what's the big deal?" And he goes, "You're going home, And then the guy, is walking out of the truck, giving me the finger and saying, "I'm going to go talk to my steward." And I go, "You do that." He goes, I'm gonna get this whole show stopped." I said, "Yeah, I don't think so. I think you're gonna go home." But it's just stupid shit like that. You wouldn't believe how some stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
Bro,
anyways,
that's gnarly.
Yeah. No,
yeah, it was. Trust me, it still is. It's still.
Oh, brother.
I really need to get go to a specialist, and then they're gonna tell me I need to have surgery on it, and I don't particularly want to do that at my age, but whatever. I probably should before I get any older.
Yeah, well, it's stuff like that you don't think about that just comes with the dangers of the job, and just all it takes is somebody not paying attention, and it can have a really bad time. But anyway,
that was so deliberate though. It hurts my soul.
Yeah, no, and that was
wow.
That's something that when I first met Doogie and we had started working together, and it was just basic, stagehand sort of labor. And the fact that I wasn't on my phone and distracted and walking away the whole time, he was like, "Oh, it was Jeff Collier, a friend of ours that's mentioned on this podcast a lot." And
I bless the day that I met Jeff and this gentleman here.
Wow, that's like I say that about Jesse, but I always say the opposite about Jeff. I always tell him to his face, "I rued the day I met you." But he teases me a lot. We worked together for many years.
Well,
he's a wonderful person, of course.
Let me tell this story real quick. I needed some labor, and I had hired the son of an old friend of mine from Cleveland. And, when you do something like that, this guy, him and his friend, they were always disappearing. I'd catch them outside smoking a joint, or they're always talking on their phone. I go, look, you need to, stop wandering away and pretend like you don't even have your phone with you when you're working. And he goes, well, there was nothing to do. I said, there's always something to do. This is at the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. I said, if you don't have anything to do, come up and ask me, or just use some initiative, right? Anyway, so I go, I'm not using these guys again. So a mutual friend of ours, Jared, who took over for doing backline for Lita Ford when I retired because it was just too much work for one person at my age to do. Jared, I was talking to Jared, and he goes, I know a couple guys probably work out really well. So he gave me their number. I called them. They, excuse me. They showed up to work. I always show up about a half an hour earlier than everybody else.
Yeah.
So I get to the storage place, and I look across the street, and there's these two guys dressed in black, holding gloves, just standing there. And so I walked up to the gate, and I go, hey, and I'm waving at them, and I go, are you my labor? And they go, are you Doogie? I said, yep. They go, we're your labor. Well, these two guys, not only did I never have to tell them anything like that, they were always finding something to do. Plus, they knew how to do everything. I mean, they were stagehands. They were experienced. So it was a gift. And since then, Jesse's kind of became my assistant. Jeff moved to Nashville. But they could, they were jack of all trades in so much as they knew everything about gear. They could work up a rough mix on a small PA. They both drove a truck. It was great. And like I said, shortly after that, I asked Jesse, I said, I kind of want to make you my assistant if you don't mind. It's not like a formal thing, but I always refer to Jesse as my assistant because he's phenomenal.
It's history.
Cub Man. What's
Cub
up,
Man.
dude?
Speaking of legendary road guys, the CEO from Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp one time came up to Cubby and he goes, what do you do? And Cubby looks at him and goes, everything.
He's the Cub Man.
He's the Cub Man. Yeah. We'll have to get into the connection with Cubby and the Beatles later.
Yes, we will.
I have to pin that reference down and get it and have the understanding.
Well, okay. So just when my first gig working with Doogie, Cubby was there and Doogie was the production manager. It was a fantasy camp at the Whiskey, and I wasn't a part of the full crew yet. I was just helping get the gear in, and I stayed to volunteer the rest of the day and
you did
set up. Yeah.
What year was that though?
That was February March 2017.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was about that time.
What? 2017? It's only been 3.5 years?
I know. It's crazy.
Wow, it seems like it's been 8 or 9.
No, I know.
It's
and that's meant to be a compliment, by the way.
No, I took it as a compliment.
Yeah, knowing you feels like 20 years of time, Jesse.
Especially a car ride somewhere. It feels like 20 years has passed by. But no,
I get that. I get that, though.
Yeah. So I had stayed to help out, and I wanted to make a good impression. And so we were talking and hanging with the whole crew, and Cubby was coming in, and then Doogie goes, hey, everybody, start singing. Oh, no, I'm jumping ahead in the story. Sorry. Somehow that day we had started turning.
Well, I always sang Tax Man.
Yes.
When I get up and make coffee in the morning and see Cubby, I always go, because he's the Cub Man. Yeah, he's the Cub Man. Tax Man.
Right.
So, hell yeah.
So when Cubby came in at the Whiskey, I started doing that, and then I go, hey, everybody, think of a Beatles song, and let's brainstorm on it. So for the next hour, everybody's throwing out Beatles songs, but they're throwing Cubby in there instead, and it was brilliant.
I said Cub together was what I said,
yeah,
and then everybody started laughing, and then I think you were like, hey, could you think of another one? And then I was thinking, oh man, I want to think of something, and then I somehow
Cubby Truffle.
Yeah, that's a good one. Then I somehow pulled out Cubby in the Sky with Diamonds.
Yep,
and
there
then
you go.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but then he walked into the Whiskey and we all started singing Cub Me Do.
Yeah,
and
Cub Me Do.
and it became a thing.
This went on for about 15 minutes, and finally Cubby just flipped everybody off and walked out the side door.
God damn. This is like a legit party game.
He's like,
it's fucking fun to play.
I'm gonna go have a cigarette.
Yeah.
By the way, let me just say real quick, Cubby is Mr. Michael Hubschmidt, legendary road guy. I've been a friend of mine for 30, 40 years, and he's been an on again, off again roommate, best roommate I've ever had. And he's worked for, like myself, a million 80s bands, and he's been Bobby Rock's drum tech, which is a feat in and of itself, for 40 years. He's originally from Seattle, and he's just unbelievable. Great.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. He's the man. He has one of the one of the most distinct and coolest voices of anybody I've ever met before. So
he's a real Cub man.
You could go on all day with those, man. It's a blast.
Yeah.
So I want to get into this, and you've talked about this before in other interviews and with me a bunch, but I want to kind of go over your, as we call it on here, the origin story of you starting out in Cleveland and kind of working at the Agora, and then when you made the move to LA. And if you want to tell the story about how you actually got the gig with Michael, that would be incredible.
All right. Well, okay, like you said, I grew up in Cleveland. I was playing in bands. Me and my lifelong partner in music, John Penka, who went on to become, such an incredible bass player, whatever. We started plotting to put bands together all through grade school, and then we actually started doing it in 6th grade, 7th grade. And we started out. A guitar player, Al Martin, had a Sears Dan Electro. One of the original guitars is worth so much money now, where it came in kind of a hard case, and there was a little amplifier with an 8-inch speaker built into it, and you would stand the case up, and it comes with a cable and a couple picks, and you plug into the case. I mean, that particular guitar, a Sears Dan Electro, what they were called, I forget I can't believe I just spaced out the name that Sears gave the models, but it'll come to me in a second.
Yeah.
Silvertone, yeah.
Yep.
That particular model, Jimmy Page recorded a lot of Zeppelin 1 and 2 using one of those guitars.
Yep.
I mean, to this day, Dan Electro still makes affordable guitars that have great necks and, really, really nice axes that you don't have to pay $1,200 for. You can get a really decent guitar that'll stay in tune for, $250 from Dan Electro.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I was never really that good. I took control, even when parents had to drive, of getting all the gear, getting it set up, and and then eventually I got a van when we were in high school, and I'd move all the gear and stuff. So eventually I was not all that great as a drummer. I'm better now because I quit playing for a while, and then I started playing again. I got an electronic drum kit, and much better now than I used to be. But anyways, I eventually fired myself from the band, and I started working for other people. And I met one of my mentors, a guy named Buddy Maver, who was a very successful musician in Cleveland, also got a booking license, and he eventually started booking a lot of gigs, moved to LA, ran the country club for a while. But anyways, working for him and his band, he put this band together. They were all great players, and all 5 of them were lead singers from different bands. So we got signed to Capitol, and everything was going great guns. We went out to Jim Gershow's Caribou Ranch in Colorado, did the first record, and right after the record came out, as will happen in the music business, the vice president retired or whatever, or the president of Capitol, and a new president came in, and of course, he basically threw out all the other projects and brought in his own people and his own projects, and so that was that was pretty much the end of that. But in working for that band, me and another guy, we had 2.5 tons of gear in a truck. We had 2 lighting trees, a spotlight, a professional JBL PA with 2 huge double 15 bins on either side of the stage, 2 horns with 2 ring radiators on either side of the horns. We worked 5 nights a week up and down the Eastern Seaboard with the band, and then Monday and Tuesday we did the concerts out at the Cleveland Agora and the Toledo Agora, where, as Jesse was saying, I saw some of the most amazing things. When King Crimson did their first U.S. tour, the only club they played was the Cleveland Agora. It was like amazing. You couldn't pack another person. Of course, they oversold the club, and the fire marshal showed up, and he said, "Hey, I'm just here to see the show. I'm not going to bust you guys." But anyways, I saw amazing things. I could tell so many stories. One of my favorite is Kiss's first tour. They were opening up for Rory Gallagher, and they kept getting booed off the stage. The audience was going, "Rory, Rory." But like Rory, he would come and play twice a year. After Frampton left Humble Pie, he would come in and play a couple times a year. I have some stuff like on my wall, a picture of me and Rory from then, a picture of me and Frampton.
Bro.
But anyway, so I went from there to I started working for. At one point, there was a Cleveland band called the James Gang that Joe Walsh came out of, and the drummer,
deeply familiar,
his tech. The drummer's tech, it was the drummer's band, Jimmy Fox, who's James of the James Gang. His tech had like an appendicitis attack or something, and I was a junior in high school, and Jimmy called me up and said, "How'd you like to come out and fill in for him? It's just a couple weeks." And I was like, "I'm there," So I went back a few years later with Tommy Bolin when Tommy Bolin joined the band. His tech was busy doing something, so I stepped in for, 4 or 5 weeks and worked for Tommy when he replaced Joe Walsh in the James Gang. But through the Agora, I met all these different bands, and then I went to work for the Raspberries. The road manager called me up and said, "Hey, man, one of our guys is quitting, and you've always said you wanted to get this opportunity." So I went to work for the Raspberries, and I got to be really tight with the guitar player. Well, actually, the whole band, but I ended up, when I moved to California, after the Raspberries broke up. So sorry.
No, you're good.
Myself and a bunch of people, me and the guitar player put a band together, and we moved out to L.A. And then I put a bunch of money into it, and we had a falling out. And I ended up just leaving. And we didn't talk for a couple of years, and then his wife got us together, and we got everything back on track, and he's been a lifelong friend ever since then.
That's awesome.
Anyway, so I spent a year and a half, 2 years with the Raspberries, and then went out to L.A., and then from there I started using some of my connections. I called up the Beach Boys because the Raspberries had toured a lot with the Beach Boys, and I did some work for them, and then I'd meet someone and just go from there.
Right.
And I hooked up back then with a company that made cabinets called Flag Systems.
Yep.
Now they just do PAs. They don't make cabinets anymore, but they had a great woodworking shop. And then through them, I met Michael Anthony and was asked if I wanted to throw my resume in at one point when Michael was looking for a tech, and so that's how I ended up hooking up, from there. But in the meantime, I spent a couple of years on the black circuit. I went to work for George Duke, and Stanley Clark, and I met Doogie, who was the best live drummer I've ever seen in my life, and Doogie and I really hit it off. And Doogie said, "Do you have a van?" And I said, "I sure do." And he goes, "You know how to build record companies, by keeping me out of it?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You want to take over my cartage?" He said, You're amazing." So for the next, 10 years on and off, I did cartage for Doogie and became very, very close to Doogie. And I'm really glad to say I saw him about 4 months before he died.
Yeah.
Just the most incredible live player I've ever seen in my life. He'd be playing with people, and they would come in and they'd be distributing music, and they'd go, they'd put a couple music stands next to his drums and put the music up. I go, "Oh, don't do that." "What do you mean?" The band didn't even get to rehearse. I said, "No, and Doogie, he'll tell you I did my homework." And, even though he can read, he'd come in and look at the music and take it and throw it under the floor, Tom, and go, "I did my damn homework," and everybody's reading the whole show, and Doogie's just playing it,
Yeah.
Just amazing. And Doogie passed away from cancer, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But just the most phenomenal live player,
Yeah.
He was the guy that replaced Mike Shreve in Santana, and then he ended up becoming a producer for Santana for the next 3 records. He also produced Aerto and Flora Purim, and just amazing.
Ayrton.
Yeah, amazing. But anyways, so that's how I met Michael Anthony, and then just I was doing a lot of black tours and a lot of black shows, and at the same time I was meeting some of the up and coming bands in the '70s, and so when I met Michael and I went to work for Michael, I ended up meeting a lot of bands that opened up for Van Halen, and ended up going to work for a lot of them, like Great White, Poison, Rat,
right.
Just a lot of '80s bands. Because Michael and I were always really nice to the opening act, and
right.
Like first day of a tour, we'd always go to their dressing room with a bottle of Jack and say, "Hey, welcome. We're gonna have a great time." And so a lot of these guys called me and said, "Hey, man, if you're not doing anything, how'd you like to come out with us?" So I ended up touring with a lot of '80s bands in the early days because of that.
Right. Well, yeah, and right before you met Michael, or a few years before, you were touring with Bob Welsh and Fleetwood Mac and doing that too.
I totally forgot that. Yeah, at one point,
I was wondering where they fit in this narrative.
Everybody would ask me after I'd been with Van Halen for a while. They go, "Hey, man," and this is not a negative thing, but they'd go, "Wow, with Van Halen, you must have seen a lot of drug use." And I said, "Nah." I said they do their share of whatever, mostly, some smoke pot, some do a little blow. I said, but, I said, hey, I worked for Fleetwood Mac for 5 years in their camp. And somebody would go, well, what does that mean? I go, Fleetwood Mac made Van Halen look like nuns or priests or whatever.
Fleetwood Mac was a cartel from what I've read.
Oh, man. They did more blow in their heyday.
They were deep. Yeah.
They did more blow in their heyday than I've ever seen since then. Everybody except Lindsay. Lindsay, he smoked a ton of pot. He always had this Hawaiian pot. I mean, if you picked up a bud, the oil would stick to your fingers, But yeah, I kind of forgot. At one point, I got hooked up in the Fleetwood Mac camp, and then I went to work for Bob Welsh, and Bob and I worked for Bob for on and off for the next 10 years. But for the next 4 or 5 years, I was Bob's guy. I did like 3 or 4 records with him, and he was phenomenal. He was great.
Yeah.
But I also worked for Fleetwood Mac's management company, which was 3 people. It was John Courage, the road manager, Mick Fleetwood, and a Warner Brothers rep named Gabriella Rass, who she was actually not a rep. She was a vice president or something. And so they started their own management company. And the bands that they managed, I did a lot of tours working for these other bands besides Bob when, and most of the time they had a built-in scenario where they'd go out on tour with Fleetwood Mac as the opening act,
Right. That's convenient.
I thought I was forgetting something. Man, I'm getting old. You have to forgive me. I'm turning 67 next week.
Oh, man. I was going to say that is next week, isn't it?
That'll be 50 years since I did my first tour. Yeah.
Wow, brother. Dang.
Yeah, because your first tour was the James Gang, if I remember right.
Yeah, for a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and as far as a non-Van Halen story that you have, I think you telling me about picking up Bob Marley at the airport, being like a runner when you were in your stagehand days, is probably my favorite. Of just like, hey, you got to pick up these Rastafarian guys and take them to
he didn't even say Rastafarian. He said the owner of the Agora, who was a legend, Hank Lacani, who's no longer with us, but talk about all the people that he gave breaks to. He called me into his office one day and he said, "You still have your van?" And I said, "Yeah," and he goes, and it only has seats in the front, right? I said, "Yeah." I had an old extended Chevy van, 3 on the column, and I love that thing. I mean, as long as you gave it water and oil, it would run forever. But I lent it to a friend, and he didn't do that, and he blew up the motor. Really horrible thing. But anyways, so he tells me, well, I booked this guy. George Harrison says he's the next big thing, and he's from Jamaica, and he travels with his whole family. And he said, so I want you to go and pick them up at the airport. And he said, and then after you do that on the way into town, I want you to stop at the farmer's market because they're vegetarians and they cook in their own room, and they they carry hot plates and they want to go and get food. So the West Side Market was this incredible open air market in Cleveland. I mean, it was indoors too, but it was both. Yeah. So when I took them there, Bob Marley, everybody's in the back, his entire family, kids, young kids and diapers and wives and whatever. and band, and Bob's sitting in the front next to me. So when I took him to the West Side Market, he's like looking at me and he goes, "This is perfect. We ask all the time, to make sure someone before we check in the hotel takes us to get food." And he said, 9 out of 10 times they take us to a 7-Eleven or something. It's like we'd rather go to a grocery store. He said, "But this is phenomenal." So I go, "Okay, cool." So they get all the food and everything. And Bob Marley's sitting there talking to me and he goes, "So next thing, do you know where we can get some sacrament?" And I said, "Some what?" And he said,
sacrament.
Some sacrament, man. And he said, ganja, what you call pot. I go, "Oh, yeah, I live in a roadhouse with 3 other road guys." I said, "Yeah, we have a couple kilos."
Damn.
And Bob Marley goes, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." So I dropped them off. This was a day off. They had the day off that day.
Yeah.
And I went home and got him a couple, got him some sacrament, as it were, and took it back to him. And, it was amazing to watch them because the women, they would take corn husks and just very carefully pull the corn husks apart. It was so thin. And then they would make the corn husks into a big paper and they would roll scones that look like little megaphones.
Shit,
and, somebody said, "Man, can you imagine ever getting stoned with Bob Marley?" I go, "I did."
Shit, yeah, bro.
But it was funny. He told me, he said, "Look, the next day was the show and everything." And he goes, "Well, we pretty much, there's a lot of us. We went through that ganja." And he said, "Can you bring more, for when we, before you take us to the airport?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I thought you had kilos." I said, "I'm not going to give you pot to take on a plane." I said, "You could lose this whole tour."
Yeah.
And I said, "Where are you going next?" And he goes, "Cincinnati." I said, "I'll give you a phone number."
There you go.
And he's like, "What?" I said, "I got you covered, but I don't want you going on a plane with, with a bunch of marijuana." I mean, this was 1973 or something,
Right.
But,
Yeah, they're
anyways,
already looking.
that was the story that Jesse was talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when people say stuff like that, it's like, yeah, I got stoned with Bob Marley.
Well, and I bring it up just because that story sticks in my mind because I had called you for info about a gig. We were prepping a camp and we had gotten off on a tangent, and then you had told me that story and then another story about something else crazy. I think it might have been a Phil Lynott Thin Lizzy story within the span of like 5-10 minutes. You're like, "All right, well, give me a call tomorrow about the gig." I go, "Well, wait a minute. Like, I'd still have, questions I got to ask you." But I was just so dumbfounded by like, "Wait, you did what?" And this is like when we first started working together. So I had never heard that story before. And I went like, and I just used it as a reference of like, oh yeah, you could drop that kind of story in conversation and then just go like, "All right, so anyway, like we were talking about," and I'm still like, whoa, hold on a second.
Yeah, I did the 79 Chinatown Thin Lizzy tour, and I was with the opening act, and then after their time came up, I think we were just doing 2 legs or something. I had gotten so tight with Phil Lynott that he had his manager hire me to just, hang out with him for the next 2 legs of the tour. So that was really cool. And there was a lot of old friends of mine on that tour from Shoko. And then the guy who was the sound guy, who I became really tight with, he was instrumental in helping me get the gig once I was doing an audition with Michael with Van Halen. And he ended up being, he was the front of house guy for the next couple of years, which was, I mean, the most amazing, like the US Festival and Fair Warning. I mean, that was Roy and Diver Down. And then South America, he was the guy that was flying the plane. It was funny. Yeah. I started this tradition at one point where one night, everybody on the tour, they'd have to get somebody to fill in for him. And on the last, we'd do a couple encores. And the second to last encore, I'd always send somebody else out. Every night, somebody different to go and get Michael's bass. And he'd turn around and go, whoa, So I got the front of house guy that I'm talking about, Roy Snyder. One of my other mentor and a brother of the road. I got him to do it, and he ran out to grab the bass, and Michael turns around and goes, hands on the bass and goes, "What the fuck? Who's flying the plane?" But anyways.
That's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, basically what all this means with these stories Jesse's asked me to tell is, it means I'm old. But you know what?
But you were there, dude. You were there.
I found a profession that I loved, and I've pretty much stayed with it. Most for 50 years, like I said.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you brought up the Brotherhood of the Road because
I own that name, by the way, guys. I want to do something with that. Make a charity. Do something which I'll try and probably give more attention to when I'm retired. But
that's a great idea.
I own that name, the brotherhoodoftheroad.com. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember when you told me that, and I'm like, yeah, you absolutely should.
Well, that's what we all are.
Yeah. Well, and getting into that, it's beyond the technical of you're in charge of setting up this rig. You're in charge of making sure this stage goes up. That's the surface of the job. And that's to people who don't know anything about it. That's kind of where it stays. Like, oh yeah, you just set up the gear or whatever. That's sort of an outsider's perspective. For you as doing it as long as you have, what does it really mean to be a roadie, getting beyond just the surface of what the job is?
Well, one of the things is it means to constantly keep learning. I started out as a drum tech. Like I said, my friend and mentor, Buddy Maver, hired me, and it was me and another guy, so I ended up learning all this stuff. Yeah. But back then, I wanted to become a road manager and a stage manager, so I did become a stage manager by working at the Agora. And I wanted to do this all the time. The guy I worked with, he just, it was a way to make a living, and on his days off, he didn't want to hear it, Yeah. So I started working for promoters and just taking any opportunity to do whatever I could. And so to answer your question, what does it mean? It means that you want to do this for a living and that you want to keep learning and you want to keep moving forward. And like I said, I remember my mom saying to me when I was like 28 or something, what are you going to be, a roadie when you're 30? And I said, Mom. At one point, you go from being a roadie to becoming a production technician. Right. And we all know that's a glorified term, just like a sanitary engineer, a garbage man,
Environmental service technician. Yeah.
I think that at one point you do become a production technician. Like I said, when I met Jesse and Jeff, I was amazed. It was such a lucky day for me because these guys were professional stagehands and they had worked a lot of theater and a lot of music. And I didn't have to explain stuff to them constantly. And they were never late. They were always on time. Yeah. And they were always ready to work. And plus, they didn't drink. Well, a lot of the guys and Jesse has seen a lot of scenarios where I have production meetings. I go, especially on the last night, we got a late load out from a live gig, and then we got to go and load up a couple trucks, if we're not in L.A. But either way, it's like, once everything gets back to LA, then we got to all, put it back into storage. And we're talking about 60 guitar amps, 30 bass amps, 16 drum sets, 17 PAs, And I would always have a little production meeting and say, it's the last night. I'm sure a couple of you guys want to hook up with some of the campers and some of our favorite counselors, like Gary Hoey among them, who was always so wonderful to the crew.
Yeah, and one of the nicest guys in the business,
and a great friend of mine. I've toured with Gary doing Band in a Box at radio stations around Christmas. I've toured with his band. I always wanted to meet him, and he was never in town when I was in town. And then one day I get a phone call from that surly old guy that walked up before named Cubby. And Cubby goes, "Hey man, I got a gig. You want to talk about it?" I go, "Yeah, who is it?" He goes, "Don't interrupt me." So he's going through this whole thing. We're going to be in a motorhome pulling a trailer. I finally go, "Enough." He goes, "There's no money." I go, "Why?" This sounds like something I just can't wait to jump into. And I go, I'm ready to tell him I don't think so. And I go, "Who is it, damn it?" And he goes, "Gary Hoey." I go, "I'm in." He was like, "What?" But anyways, getting back to what I was saying, I'd always ask the guys, please don't party, have a beer, say goodbye to everybody, and then go to bed. And we got to load stuff tomorrow. We got a long day, and Jesse and Jeff, they would always do exactly that,
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case with a lot of the crew, which is why Jesse was laughing before, because we had a couple particular incidents which I'm not going to go into.
Well, yeah, no, we don't need to get into that.
Just imagine.
But people showing up totally hungover and not being in work mode, or not showing up at all.
Well, I wouldn't say it was a lot of people. There was a couple times where
there was
happened.
a couple people. That
not a lot. It was a couple, but it was.
There was some before I met you too. So.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that.
I mean, one time we were doing a thing at the Playboy Mansion, and this guy.
Oh boy.
I had been on the road with Chickenfoot and with Van Halen, and whatever, and so sometimes I wouldn't be able to be there, so I'd have an alternate guy as a production manager. Well, this guy that I was working with, and I won't say his name, we're at the Playboy Mansion, and he goes walking by me. It's an open bar, and he's got like 4 drinks in one hand, 2 drinks in the other, and I go, "Who are all those drinks for?" And he goes, "Me, you got a problem with that?" And I said, "I'll have a problem if you can't work later." Well, when we got done, I found him under the stage, passed out, and he was useless. I mean, I told him, "Move, we're tearing the stage down."
That's when you insert the Price is Right music and you go bum 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 bum, and it's like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, but
sorry. Anyway,
you failed.
I mean, when I was younger, I would drink and get high. I mean, even on the road, I was the bartender in the heyday of Van Halen. We had a bar on stage right, But I'm so old now. I don't drink on the road unless I have a couple days off, and I don't drink. I used to wait until 2/3 of the way through the show and just start drinking. I'd have a bottle of vodka or a bottle of tequila, and
right.
I can't even think like that now because when I drink, I tend to go for it. And you can ask Jesse that. I hosted drinking nights at my place before COVID hit, and I'd always invite the crew guys over, and we'd sit around and tell stories and laugh and drink, But I can't even do that anymore. Nor do I want to. I just want to be done for the night. And it's funny, I'm the first one in my bunk. I used to rule the back lounge, and I don't even go there anymore because I'm like I said, I'm in my 60s, and I'm the first one in my bunk. I mean, it kills me if people go, you want to do a bump? I go, do you know what year it is? By the way, if I had a heart attack, you could go to jail.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're doing them a solid by staying out in that case for sure. Yeah, because I mean, anyone could have one, but just as likely not.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think that the most innocent thing you can do, depending on how heavy the pot is, but if anything, I'd rather see people smoke pot when they're working, but I would just assume they didn't. But I mean, when you smoke pot, it's not the same as when you're drinking or when you're doing harder drugs. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And it also depends on that person's kind of tolerance for the thing in general, too, because it's like I've road crewed around town for our fairgrounds and for like the city park gigs and stuff like that. I've done a bunch of those kind of gigs, and I've seen other dudes like, I used to be fucked up all the time, but the one time I wouldn't was when I had to go, like roll people's cabinets around and shit like that because it's all too easy to like slip a disc. My old man did it, so I know I could just as likely be somebody to get hurt. And I know that being a little buzzed is the easiest way to get hurt when you're doing some sort of manual labor.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also harder to be part of the hangout too.
Hey,
when I'm fucked up, I get very like kind of in my head, and then I'm not talking and hanging out and meeting people, and that's the whole point of doing those gigs. Besides, like
oh yeah,
the pizza dinner and
the pizza dinner,
15 an hour and shit.
The pizza dinner, I like that.
Yeah, Amici's, here we come, baby.
Yes,
whoop, whoop.
But no, I've seen you, and it's funny because I think people, whether it's and not naming people specifically, but in general, just sometimes people, especially if they're first getting into road gigs and stuff, they hear stories about from back in the day, and they think that it's all one big rolling party, or that somehow when you're in charge of the gear, that gives you more leeway to get drunk, get high, and then just like not do as good of a job. And it's just, you see so many people get faulted that way. Or sometimes you're working for bands and they want you to, hey, have a drink, hey, smoke a joint with me. And then if something goes wrong, they might be the first people going, what the fuck? And then yelling at you. And so you have to keep your wits about you for sure.
Yeah. And I think that what I stated, I don't even want to go there nowadays.
No.
It's pretty common with guys my age. Where we all started out, maybe we drank a little bit and, did some other things through the years.
Yeah.
But, it's the older you get, it's like, man, I'm here to do this work and not to party.
Right.
Like I like to drink, but I pick and choose my time, and I certainly don't do it when I'm driving or do it on somebody else's time. It's funny because I'll go see somebody in town, comes through town, and they call me up and go, hey, come and say hello. And they'll go, are you going to stay for the show? 90% of the time I go, no. Not what I want to do on my day off. Or they'll say, do you want a cocktail? And I go, no, I got to drive 50 miles home,
I think that brings up a point that I've always felt about this. It goes hand in hand with just being a musician, which we all are, as well as, working as road crew and stuff like that, is that you have to be responsible for yourself. Everything we've kind of been, talking around is the idea of like, what makes Jesse and Jeff stand out? The way they handle their shit. They get the job done well. They had experience. You didn't have to tell them, like, you didn't have to help them along like you would have totally had to help me through most of those activities.
That was such a godsend.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that comes down to is that in this in the industry, working on that side, the party's always going to be raging in some quadrant, right? Now you're in a different phase of your life and career, but the shit is still being offered, is still going on. And I think that it just speaks to like, life experience teaches you that you need the self-discipline. Maybe just, your own reason does, but I think that it just speaks to how important it is. You have, like Jesse said, you have to keep your wits about you. You have to have the self-discipline. If you do like to get down, you have to do it at a time when the job is all said and done and it's safe to.
Yep. Hey, let me make a comment on that. Let me interject something.
Yeah, of course.
Which Jesse was probably going to ask me to bring up. What you were saying, of course, I like the way you expressed that. Because I was party raging in some quadrant. But in the heyday of Van Halen, there's a lot of people would say, man, I heard this and I heard that. I'll tell you something. In the heyday of the David Lee Roth years, we played a lot of times 3 or 4 nights in an arena. Most arenas we did 2 nights, but I mean, they always sold out. Maybe some of the smaller cities we didn't, we just did 1 night. But any night that we didn't have to tear down, we had this tradition that they had where they would rent 2 huge suites that were connected to each other. And there's usually 2 bedrooms off of each suite and a huge living room area. And down through the years, a couple different guys ran these things. One guy, the first guy, when I was doing it, was Ed Wanabo, who is now Kenny Chesney's production manager. And back then it was called Zed's Bevies. And then when Ed moved on, Rudy Liren took over, who was Edward Van Halen's original guitar tech and was with the band forever. But we carried 10 30-gallon plastic garbage cans that never, ever saw anything but ice and beer in them. And we had a case that had 6 industrial blenders. It was custom made. 6 industrial blenders. And they would give Rudy $500, during the day. And at one point after sound check, he would go out. The runner would take him and he'd buy all kinds of fresh fruit and he'd buy all liquor and stuff. And then they'd always hire a chick who would be dressed up in a really short French maid's outfit. And Rudy would wear a tuxedo and he'd run the bar and everybody got 5 passes. And you were only allowed to give them to women. And then there was a party backstage after the show and our security would go around and check off who could go to the hotel. And then the party would move over to the hotel and it would usually go till like 9 in the morning. And you know what was so cool is the band always showed up. I mean, it wasn't just crew guys. And those parties were legendary. I mean, I always said, not to be crude, but, if you couldn't get laid on a Van Halen tour, you didn't want to, Wow.
Right.
It was just really an incredibly awesome piece of history to be a part of,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Holy shit.
Oh, yeah. Well, and even, going through we're blessed now with YouTube to where you can go and look up, them playing the Oakland Coliseum and doing Unchained with the giant stage and just looking at that.
There's no overdubs on that, man.
No.
That Oakland Coliseum thing, that's totally live and it's so in the pocket, man.
Yeah. And you look at the whole scope of it and you're like, Jesus Christ, just look at, it's incredible to look at,
Yep. Yeah, I tell you, like I said, I walked into being a part of a piece of history, which for me it's still going on with Michael because this year my relationship with Michael Anthony, who is the nicest rock star in the world, not just boss, but a close friend, is going on 41 years. And, I'll tell you one of the most incredible things about Michael. We had anywhere between 80 to over 100 people, depending on what tour, that worked on the crew. And we'd be in rehearsals, and somebody walked by, and Michael would go, "Who's that guy? What does he do? What's his name?" And I'd tell him, and Michael would call out his name. The guy would look at him, and he'd go, "Come here." Go, "Hey, I'm Michael, man. We're going to have a great tour." And he'd call him by name, and the guy's like, "How does he know my name?" But he'd always, say, "Hey, man, come by, have a shot. This is going to be a great tour." Back then, we would tour for 12 months or more behind each record. And you know what? We'd have rehearsals, and Michael would always take the crew out, usually twice, but at least once. You're talking about picking up a tab for 80 guys that are drinking and eating. And Michael would always take the crew out, just him and the crew, at least once, if not twice during rehearsals,
Yeah.
It's just, but yeah, the Van Halen years, just, wow, what a piece of history to walk into.
I mean, I always heard that he was a baller, like a legit dude, and that's just further proof.
Oh, yeah.
He's the nicest guy. I mean, I never take anybody to Michael's warehouse unless...
he's an irreplaceable bassist, too.
Yes.
Hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Totally
You can't really
underrated.
replace him or say supplant him with anybody else without changing what it was.
Well, Michael's very unrated as a bass
I'm gonna
player.
stop being weird. Yes. No, he's one of my all-time favorites, and I'm a serious fucking bass player. So
Too bad if he could just learn to sing.
what's up with that? He doesn't sing. He does all the backups, right?
That was me being ridiculous.
He's just being mean,
being a smart ass.
taking the piss out of him.
Being facetious.
Yes, I was about to say that.
facetious, hey.
No, if you look at some of the stuff, like when Michael plays, he likes to go out and jam with other people like John Five and Jeff Beck and Billy Gibbons and Jimmy Vaughn. They have a band that they play like once every 8 years or something. But when Michael sings lead, it blows everybody away. I mean, like in a 2004 tour, instead of him doing a solo, they said, "Why don't you sing lead on a couple songs?" And he sang lead on "Somebody Get Me a Doctor," and just he would blow the doors off the place every night.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's people don't give him enough credit for sure. Yeah, no, and you could, and I mean, we could do a podcast just on that alone. It's just there's so much to talk about, even just with the Michael stuff and stories with all of that, and it's crazy just the amount of rock and roll that you've been a part of and gotten to see and feel and hear and just all of that.
Oh, you mean like Tommy?
Smell?
See me. Feel me, touch me, heal me.
Yeah,
that's my favorite band of all time, by the way, which Jesse knows.
Yeah, one of mine too.
I saw the Who 9 times with Keith Moon. I've seen the Who 27 times in my life.
Oh man,
but I
saw him a lot of Who shows.
Saw him 9 times with Keith, man, when I was younger.
Yeah. I mean. So, being that big of a fan, I'm that big of a fan of a couple of things, and I parse out like different eras. Do you have like a favorite era of Who, considering how long they were around? I love late Who myself.
With Keith, yeah, and then I wasn't a big era of the Kenny Jones, a big fan of the Kenny Jones era. And I think that I don't think that the Who were either. To tell you the truth, I thought what they did. It was during that era where I actually stopped buying a Who record the second it came out. But man, when Zach Starkey came in, he recaptured it. Although one time Michael and I went to see them, they invited us. We went to see him on the tour they did with. Oh man, my memory. Who's the drummer for Toto right now?
It's not. It's not Steve Smith. No,
that's Journey.
No, for some reason I can't think of his name. He's incredible. And he did one
in my pocket.
One tour with the Who,
right?
And when we were leaving, Michael and I were walking out. We went back and said hello to everybody, except I still didn't get to meet Townsend. But we were walking out, and he's walking to his car by himself with his suit bag over his shoulder. And Michael called out to him, and he goes, "Oh my God!" And then he goes, "You're Michael Anthony." And, they went up to each other and hugged and talked for about 20 minutes. Who is it?
According to Google, Shannon Forrest since 2015, and then Simon Phillips.
Yeah, Simon Phillips. That's who I
yeah,
was.
Phillips.
Yeah, Simon Phillips. He did a one tour with the Who. It was a huge stadium tour. It was one of their retirement tours, you know. But when Zach Starkey and Simon Phillips, he was phenomenal. But man, when Zach Starkey came in, as Zach always said, my dad taught me how to play the drums, but his best friend and his drinking buddy was Keith Moon, and he said Keith taught me his style, and I just think Zach Starkey is the most natural, closest thing to Keith Moon, you know.
Oh yeah, him and Pino Palladino is just a killer rhythm section. Yeah,
I was hoping that Michael would have gotten that job.
You know, I mean, it's there's also, you know, it is what it is, I guess.
I heard that they were kicking around his name, but we were on tour one time, and you know what? One of the coolest things that ever happened to me, I had met John and become friends with John. And one time, my phone rang, and it was Entwistle. And he said, you told me if I ever had the opportunity, and he said, we're going out, Who's going out, not my solo band, and how would you like to come out and tech for me? And I was just like, you know, a phone call I've been waiting for all my life. But we were in rehearsals. I think it was 98. I think we were in rehearsals with Gary Cerrone. But I said, I can't believe this. I'm going to say this, but I can't. And he goes, wait a minute, you know, after you know everything you told me, and you know what a big fan. He goes, wait a second. He said, are you in rehearsals with Michael right now? And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay, I get it. I withdraw the offer. I would never do that. You know, you've been Michael's guy for decades. And he said, that is the only reason I would accept. I said, that's the only reason I would say no. You know,
right?
But that was such a great thing for me personally to have had Entwistle call me and ask me that. You know.
Oh yeah. It's the phone call of a lifetime.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's any other higher form of validation. I couldn't imagine what the fuck it is, to be honest. I'm like, your hero wants you to work for him. Like, I mean, bro.
Well, you know
guy.
What? You know what? That came about because he showed up at NAMM one time, and Michael, for a long time, when Ken Hensley, who was the keyboard player and one of the main writers and singers in Uriah Heep, he had become the customer service rep, the A&R artist rep at Ampeg. So, he was a childhood hero who became a really good friend of mine. But him and Michael, during NAMM, Ampeg used to still have a Ampeg night, and they would, they'd put on a big jam. And at one point, Michael and Ken would always go out and they'd do they do something like Run with the Devil and Somebody Get Me a Doctor. And then they do like 5 Uriah Heep tunes, like better known stuff. And one night, Hensley, comes running up to me. Michael just got through playing. And Hensley came off stage and he runs up and he goes, hey man, John Entwistle's here and he wants to go on. And the stage manager was this guy who wasn't very good at being a stage manager. And it turns out he was also Entwistle's tech on this solo tour Entwistle just finished doing. And he said, Entwistle wants to know if you'll help him out because even though the stage manager's his tech, he doesn't want to, the guy's not very good. And I said, I get that because I knew who the guy was. This guy actually at one point had a card that said, a star among roadies, a roadie to the stars. And I was like, he handed me the card and I read it and ripped it up and threw it on the ground and went, oh God. But anyways, so I get Entwistle hooked up and they start playing and Entwistle turns on, he's shaking his head at me. And I go, come here, so he comes over the side, I go, what's up? And he goes, it's not my sound. He said, make me sound like Michael. I go, that's what Michael sounds like, but you play differently. And I said, when you finish this song, give me 45 seconds and I'll do it. I know what your sound is. So he goes, okay. So he said, he grabbed me and he said, I'll talk. You do whatever you're going to do. So I threw the amp head on standby, took the amp head off, and I put a crate head up and I dialed it up and plugged it in and started it. And I said, anytime, go. And Entwistle was like, that took 38 seconds. But anyways, then they started playing again and Entwistle looks at me and goes, it's fucking amazing. That's my sound. And I said, I know, he likes a lot of high end and he likes a lot of low end. You take a lot of the mid out.
You gotta scoop it, yeah.
and just his playing, brings out the low end or
right
whatever. So he loved it, and he, afterwards he said, come to the dressing room and talk to me. And so he took my name and my phone number, and like I said, a couple months, maybe 4 or 5 months later, he called me. It was like amazing. But I mean, that's got a lot to do with why he called me. It wasn't just like, But I had met him through Michael several times. John and Michael would get together and hang out and have a cocktail or 5.
Dang.
Oh, that's
a
awesome.
Cocktail or 10.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, something I've been thinking about too, getting ready for this podcast, and you not taking that gig and jumping ship on that. I know you would never do that, but it really shows a loyalty that you have to Michael, and because of everything he's done for you. And to me, that's one of the virtues of being a good roadie or a good tech or a good crew person. And that, in thinking about this, really like how people get into this business is that somebody mentors you or kind of brings you into it, or pulls you into this world. And you got kind of pulled into that world too when you were first starting out and doing stagehand stuff. And I don't know if this is going to get too philosophical, but I'll go for it. To me, it's like it's an extension of what people used to do and what life used to be like with, tribes and storytellers and things like that. There's so much of roadie history that's not written down. It's all oral history. It's stuff that your mentors passed on to you, that you pass on to, me, thankfully, and other people. And I've had other people do the same with me. And I don't know, do you think that it's kind of as crazy as it can be sometimes, do you think it's kind of like this oddly traditional life in a way that kind of harkens back to like how people used to live and sort of have this sort of brotherhood and community?
Well, sure. It's like going back to the carny life, and the carny life, the carny life goes back to, traveling bands of musicians in the Middle Ages and stuff, Yeah. I mean, it's a little different because, these guys in the Middle Ages didn't have a huge couple, 5 sound trucks following them around. But it is a certain way of life, and that harkens back, as you said, and I fully embrace that life, and I mean, and like I said, as far as Michael, that was such a lucky day for me when that happened, and like I said, for 41 years it hasn't just been a boss employee thing. We've been friends, brothers, really.
Yeah.
And Michael's always been there, when anything happens. I mean, Michael's very much a family man. He's very, very dedicated. He's been with his wife since they were in junior high, and he's got 2 daughters, and he's got grandkids. And I love watching him with his grandkids, and just like I used to love watching him with his kids, because he's so fiercely a family man, and he's so ensconced in it, It's great, it's wonderful.
Yeah, no, along being a great musician, he's just a great person as far as the way he conducts himself, and that's, that can be in short supply sometimes, so it's always nice to
But what I was saying before is anybody that, if I ever have somebody where I need help in Michael's warehouse, has to be somebody that Michael's met on a few occasions. And obviously Cubby is on the okay list, but I very soon after I met Jesse, got Jesse on that list. And, now Michael's like, hey, we need to do something, call Jesse, or if it takes a couple people, he'll like, see if you can get Cubby and Jesse and whatever. And so now Jesse's like, actually I've talked to Jesse about, I don't plan on touring past 70 because the idea of a 20-hour day when I'm 70 years old, the physicality of it, I'm not sure I could or will want to do that when I'm 70. So,
sure.
But Michael probably will still be able to, because for Michael, it's not a 20-hour day. You know what I mean? I usually get up at 6, go to the lobby, 7 o'clock, we leave for the gig. Sometimes the crew, sometimes there'll be 2 runs and the crew will go over a little later because they got to get the lights off the stage, get them up in the air. But,
so are you still responsible for moving like a lot of gear and setting up like each show and stuff like that?
Oh yeah. And what I was going to say was, I've talked to Jesse about possibly replacing me on the road when the time comes. if his own career hasn't, if he's not platinum by then, you know. But yeah, I'm still totally in charge.
His fingers are in like 7 pies, and they're all about to go platinum. So
I
know. We might have to recruit his underling for you, which isn't me because I suck.
Well,
I've got you somebody good, as you know.
I've got a couple guys in mind. A couple guys, you know.
Yeah.
But Jesse is just phenomenal, like I said, and you know, I'd like to bust his balls, but I have to be honest first, you know.
Well, no, it's you know.
Plus, his mother makes the most amazing salsa ever, which she makes a mild for me, and she makes a hot for Michael Anthony. Michael's like, you know, he has his own hot sauce, and he has 4 or 5 different brands of stuff, and he's like, we gotta quit talking about this and get her in with him in his business, you know.
Well, it's interesting because it's you know, through meeting you and doing work with you and now getting to know Michael, it's like you get to see beyond just of course, when I was, you know, a teenager, I was a huge Van Halen fan and still loved the music and all of that. But it's, you know, looking at it now, like, oh, he's just a really good person that I've, you know, is sort of like, I guess, a colleague or associate. I don't know what the official title would be, but, you know, sort of becoming more of a friend kind of person. And it's just crazy.
Both. I mean, you know him on a professional level and you know him on a personal level, you know?
Right. And it's just,
let me ask you a question.
Of course. Yes.
I got to curtail this a little bit.
Yes.
I mean, we could do this for another hour and a half. If you want to
I know.
If you want to do a part 2, I'd be open to that, you know?
Oh, yeah, anytime.
I mean, we pretty much only got up to when I started working with Michael. I mean, there's a lot more that we could touch base on, you know.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely no. We need to do a part 2. I do have one just sort of really quick question that I feel like you answering this would be sort of a definitive guide for this. But
should I give my standard answer, like cut you off right now and go 8 inches? Yeah. Oh, okay, 5. What the fuck? You know?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. It doesn't get old. We
now know.
Okay,
what we
4,
need to
damn
know.
it. Why are you asking me that? No.
Youch.
No, okay, so I want to ask, like, tour etiquette, bus etiquette. I think you would be among other legendary roadies that are still out there doing the thing. You are sort of the definitive guide to this, and just once and for all, just good tour bus etiquette, tour etiquette.
I've always usually been the bus monitor, at least a lot of my career. You know, the bus mom, as it were.
Got to have your hall pass.
First of all, I'm guilty of it. Everybody's guilty of it, but punctuality, be there. I mean, I've overslept a couple times, especially back in the day. You know, but be on time. Clean up after yourself. Don't expect the driver to, you know, when 4 or 5 guys are partying, you know, for 10 hours on a submarine ride, they get to the hotel and they grab their bags and leave the back lounge a wreck. That's not fair to the driver. You know, throw bottles and cans away. Clean up a little bit. You know, I mean, it's not like we expect anybody to vacuum the bus, but bus etiquette, you know. And also be considerate of other people on the bus. You know what I mean? Like if somebody buys something and puts it in the refrigerator and puts their name on it, don't eat it. You know what I mean?
No, don't do that.
I know people do that. You know, they go, well, look, hey, once it goes in the refrigerator, it's fair game. Not when it's got my name on it. You know. But bus etiquette, you know, be on time and also don't. I mean, one problem I had I worked with people where. On long rides, I've never been a pill guy, and they would eat pills, and they would literally, you know, just become a drooling blob of human flesh. And you know, a couple times I can think of this one guy on more than one occasion he would pass out in the hallway of the bunks because he couldn't even get into his bunk. And then you know, it's like. Why are you subjecting 10 other people to that, or 8 other people, or 11 other people? You know what I mean?
Right.
Especially the more people you have on a bus, you know? I mean, every once in a while, you end up on a bus where you have condos and there's only 5 other guys besides you, so you actually have 2 open bunks. That's phenomenal. But, you know, bus etiquette is very important. It always has been, even when I was, you know, I mean, when, you know, in the day, I would... few times rage, you know, be on a day and a half trip and I'd stay up the whole day and a half, you know.
Right.
But I still was considerate of other people, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any as far as general touring etiquette, not specifically on the bus, but just
once again, be on time.
Yeah,
and also remember everybody has their own job, and be considerate of other people's jobs. I remember one time, a really good buddy of mine, who was our stage manager with Sammy Hagar. His name's Mark Storm. I kind of jumped in a little early, and he's supposed to assign stagehands and do whatever, and he's up on the drum riser, and he jumps off the drum riser and walks up to me and he goes, "Hey, I guess I'm just going to go hang out on the bus." And I go, "What?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, you seem to have everything here. You jumped in ahead of my job." And he's a really close friend of mine. And I felt so bad just the way he laid that on me. I said, "Look, man, I'm really sorry." And he was totally right. I was totally in the wrong to do that. And I still bring it up to him. We still laugh about it. But like, clean up after yourself. Don't leave your cases in other people's way. And if you ever have a guest and that guy gets fucked up, don't bring him on stage. I've had friends where I caught them, no matter what I told them, I catch them trying to sneak into the dressing room area. Well, that's enough to get somebody fired. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You tell somebody, don't do this no matter what. And then they go, "Yeah, but the sun was in my eyes. I had to get out of the sun," or whatever.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No. I think we might have lost Davey in the connection here. I think he dropped out of the meeting, but yeah, I don't know if we can get him back in here. But if you got to get going, I don't want to keep you.
Well, I do want to get going, but let's do a part 2 because, like I said, we kind of were jumping around, but there's a lot more stories and a second part of my career.
Oh, absolutely, and I'd love to get into like more of the technical about how you think and manage shows, and the whole scope of all of that, and your process behind that too. So we can definitely do that on a part 2.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, and on behalf of Davey and I, thank you so much for doing this. And on behalf of myself, I have 5 people that I can count that have been mentors to me, thankfully. And most people are lucky to get one. And you're one of them, and you're one of those people that just, totally changed the trajectory of my life. So, it's,
it was a very lucky day for me, brother. I'll tell you that right now, definitely.
Yeah. You're amazing, man, and can't wait to do a part 2 and an actual just in-person regular hang.
Yeah, I know.
That's cool.
I want you to come out. I want to go to the Japanese restaurant. I'm curious if they're going to open back up now that Newsom said it was okay. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that yet. I'm still trying to find a place to get a vaccine shot. But all right, brother,
Absolutely.
I love you, man.
Love you too, man. Thank you so much.
My pleasure entirely. I'll talk to you later.
Oh, dude.
We're smiling. Let's go.
Yes.
Dude, bro.
Dude, bro. Man, bro, dude. Welcome back. Oh, my God. I have a list of dream guests, and this was by far the most easily obtainable dream guest, being that, Doogie is a good friend and mentor and somebody that's in a phone call's reach. But it's just, I don't know, man. Aside from just what he's done and who he's connected to, I love that dude so much, and he's totally changed my, like I said, the trajectory of my life. And yeah, I just wanted to get him on here just for the pure documentation perspective, because he's done interviews and, people have, asked him questions, and he gets bugged about this kind of stuff, but he hasn't done a lot of podcast kind of stuff. And he's on, Facebook, but he's not really a social media guy. He just does the thing. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get him in here to, just have him tell some of his story. And I knew that within the time that we had to talk to him, I knew that it wasn't going to be enough to cover everything. And I'm so glad that we'll be able to do a part 2 at some point. And I'm just stoked. I'm just totally stoked.
I'm glad to hear it. As I similarly and simultaneously and synchronistically was.
Yeah.
And am and therefore will be. Doogie is a good guy. He's super cool. When we said that, I was like, I didn't want to blurt it out, but I'll blurt it out in the fucking outro. I was like, yeah, the second episode, more like spin-off podcast.
Oh my God.
More like spin-off podcast, because every story every name and his relationship to the person and the name and then the story that ensued, I spent most of the time gasping for air. 'Cause wow.
Yeah.
And he's just such a wonderful, sweet dude. It makes sense that you guys would, hit it off and work well together and, find each other in the island of, honestly, it's like, I figure it's, you guys always, you round up and assume people are nice, but the world is like 70, 80% D-bags and probably a higher ratio in the roadies, like in that industry. I mean, I think what a lot of it was, but let me flip it back to you before I get into the subtext that I think undergoes some of the conversation about that. But yeah, well, you go.
Well, no, I think that it's something to where, you meet all sorts of people that when you are trying to do anything creatively or in a music field or and I'm sure it's the same way with people that are trying to be actors and actresses or, whatever you want to do.
I'm trying to be both out here, player.
Well, I know. You got them chops.
I'm fluid. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Game recognizing game.
Yeah.
Tap to you.
So you hit so many brick walls when you're starting, or you hit a point where you might feel like you plateau or whatever it is, and you just have come up against some sort of resistance from somewhere, or that's what they call paying your dues and grinding on, just trying to get gigs or whatever.
Yeah.
So when you meet somebody like him and he takes you under your wing, for me, it's, not only is it just the knowledge and the experience of stuff, but it's just more it's the thing of like, oh yeah, this person, sees something in me, and I had already had people that had mentored me and given me pointers on stuff and pushed me in the right direction, teachers, other roadie type people. And then meeting him, he was along with that, but he, along with just the information, we've become really good friends. And so we'll just, talk to each other about whatever. And it's just cool because he's somebody that you can go to for when you have those life questions and advice on things, or you want to ask, hey, I'm thinking about, what do you think about this? And then he can just give you that info, or not give it to you, but you know what I mean? He's a good guy.
Sell it to you for very, very reasonable prices, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, right. He's like you said, he's the real deal. And in a lot of instances where, people could be dismissive for being in that position, he's not. And meeting people like him and other, colleagues of his, I find that the people who get in positions like that don't they aren't condescending. Some people will, but for the most part, most people are, fairly good people, and then some people like him are just extraordinarily good people, and you're just like, whoa, it takes you back on just like, how kind people can be sometimes,
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So all right, now I'm gonna bury the rest of this outro in the subtext. So there's like, I think that there's a morality tale that underlies like his career, because something like working with Michael for 40 years straight, it's like, it's wonderful, it's unusual in this industry in general, right? Having that kind of longevity in that kind of position, and all that kind of thing. And people are always going to wonder, what's the underlying factors that make that sort of thing tick? Because that's what we explore here on this here council sort of situation. Yeah. And the reality is, it's a morality tale, because you have to be a nice person, you have to know your shit, and you have to be responsible like almost all the time. And you have to hold the people working for you accountable. And everything that Doogie is about is those things. And that's why he gets to have that by choice. It's like he started as a young cat, but he obviously like opted in for the long haul. And it's worked out by virtue of the type of person he is my point.
Yeah.
It's like you don't get called back when you're an asshole. I know, because of, my bipolar makes me an asshole. So I don't get called back. And I get it. But that's why it's important to recognize people who are always nice, who are always giving you that the open hand extending, like, oh, okay, here, and then when you have a question, when you need advice, they're also there. That's a very unique type of person.
Yeah,
he's one of them.
Absolutely. I call him sensei, and he gets a kick out of that. And he is a sensei.
My sensei's from Cleveland, totally.
Yeah. No, but it's true. He's one of my senseis for sure. And
yeah, dude.
It's the thing is with somebody like that, and why they're able to hold a position for as long as they do. It all varies because he's worked for a bunch of different acts, and he was lucky enough, I wouldn't say early because he had been touring since, like late 60s, early 70s, around that time. So by the time he got hooked up with Michael, he had already been sort of around the business for a while. But there's a lot of bands that were really popular at a certain time, and then they were able to afford steady crew people all the time. And then, they either come and go, break up, or they'll get back together, later on. And there's a lot of turnover. And you could see tons of bands like that even now, where they'll have a hit or two and they're really popular, and then they kind of go away and you go, oh, what happened to those guys? So that's a factor. In that, Van Halen was as successful as they were, and that, Michael's been playing for as long as he has. So that's a factor. And it's also just a matter of personality wise. There's a lot of people that they go, oh, well, why can't I find a band, or why can't I get a gig? And then there might be the most phenomenal players or technicians around, but personality wise, it's like, can you hang with those people, every day for, however many months, that is. And we, just having Josh Bennett on here too, it's the same thing. He was saying they toured 10 months out of the year, it was like, and yeah, so it's a lot of time to be spending with people. And, something that we were talking about at the end of the podcast is just, bus and tour etiquette of respecting people's space and like, showing up on time. And it's all of these different factors at play. It's where like business, personality, and ability all meet. And then sometimes the business gets in the way of it. Sometimes people's personality gets in the way. Sometimes it's ability, sometimes just crazy things happen out of nowhere that are unpredictable. And then, you don't, and then things kind of get put on pause or whatever, or get, or you have to find a new gig. And
or a pandemic,
or
so rain of frogs.
Yeah, or locusts. Asteroids, a number of things.
Open, so.
Yeah, right.
It's that time of night.
Yeah, it is.
Podcast time leached into Bible time. I'm sorry.
Yes, but yeah, so it's a bunch of different factors, and he met people that were able to introduce him to that gig, and then Doogie's ability and who he is personally has kept him there. And it's somebody that that gig has been his mainstay, along with touring with whoever else for that's been his main gig. And then he's worked with other people in that time whenever Michael wouldn't be touring, but that's been his bread and butter for 40 years. And there's a few people that get to say that, even people at the top of their field, and if they're sound people, guitar techs, whatever it is, they might not have steady people like that, or they will, they get hired on like a tour to tour basis, so it's not guaranteed. And so the fact that has that relationship is really an old school thing,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a little bit of his grandfather did, because wouldn't you say that it's fair to say that it's not the same sort of industry with the same amount of opportunity as maybe when he was talking about like the 80s and stuff like that? Would you say that it's a little bit harder out there?
Well, there's
in road crew and stuff and teching.
I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily the person to be the definitive authority on this, but just from what I've seen, I am now. From what I've seen and heard, it's a bunch of different things. So back in that era, there would be crew people that could be on retainer. So when you were somebody's crew person, you were paid all year round. So basically it was like, I'm paying you for like exclusive access to you. So whenever anything comes up last minute, we're going to go to a recording session, we're going to tour, you're the guy, you're the person on call for that. And now there's acts that can still do that, but it's like not nearly as many as before. So there's people who are the first, second calls for different artists and bands, but they're not like on retainer. So you have to have, as a term that you used, your fingers in a bunch of different pies. So I know people that tech for multiple bands, and they will have a main priority artist, but they might not be on retainer, but that person might keep them touring most of the year. And then when they're in town, they'll get hit up for other gigs locally or the other shorter tours because they know they're not going to go back out again for, until next summer or something like that. So it's like, so it's and again, every situation is different. There's no necessary absolutes. A lot of it now too is that you will have one or two people doing the jobs that 3, 4, 5 people might have done back in the day. So if you're a guitar tech, you're probably going to be teching for guitar, bass, and then maybe keys, and then drum tech and like a tour manager. As far as like those are two separate jobs. So you might handle the whole band and then have a sound guy with you who's also a tour manager. So for a lot of touring, it's doing more jobs, and then you could get paid more, or you might be getting the same amount of money for one job. It depends on the band. There's no absolutes, but it really is, dependent on each situation. But at the same time, I know people that everybody who does this does it because they love it. They're able to make a living doing something that they love, and you can make a good living doing it, but it's not like, oh yeah, I'm just raking in the money like I would be working in an office. It's not necessarily that way, but you either make enough money to get by or you make a good living, and it's hard, but like you do it because you love it. I can't wait to get out there and start not just playing gigs, but I can't wait to get out there and start doing tech gigs again. And it's like a big community. It's like if you work the same clubs all the time, I see the same crew people and I go, hey, so-and-so, whoever it may be, how are you doing? And then we get into a conversation. Oh, hey, I haven't seen you since, last July. Oh, good, man. How you doing? And I enjoy seeing those people. And, like Saint Rock is a great club like that. And the Belly Up in Solana Beach is a great club like that. And there's tons of them, but those are two that pop in my mind of like every time I do gigs there and I see those crew people and those guys, they take care of you. The food is good. They make sure everything's together. They help you out. It's just, they're awesome. And I love, hey man, how's it going? Yeah, good to see you again. And it's just, I love that whole environment. And,
you love greetings.
Yeah.
I guess salutations more than anything else.
I mean, if our intro didn't give it away, I am enthusiastic about, the greeting of a conversation.
Yeah, you come hard with the greeting every time.
Yeah,
Respect.
man. But yeah, that's it, kind of in a nutshell, basically.
That's cool.
Yeah, and
I like your take on it. I'm excited because you're the next interview subject for the next podcast. So.
Well, I don't know about.
I'm going to put on a sock and staple some of my old hair to it, and it's going to be mock Jesse, and then you be you, and this one will be messy Jesse.
I'm going to grab my pinwheel hat that I keep behind the lava lamp, and then I'll be all ready for your interview questions.
Excellent.
Yes, podcast listener, dear citizen, we thank you so much for joining us on this ride and. With new guests and new, interview questions and new setups and all sorts of things. And we just appreciate the heck out of you, listener.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us on the bizarre ride through the far side on our slip and slide of music and love. And thanks and stuff. And
have a good times.
Night. Fuck off!
Sonic City Council was created by Jesse Davidson and Davey Sipes and engineered by Max Taylor at Desert Sound Studio in Palmdale, California. Thank you to Disaster Cabinet for the outro music. Intro music written by Max Taylor. Sonic City Council is produced in association with AMS Music Academy and the Showcase Venue. For more information, visit theshowcasevenue.com.